Recording here on Saturday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the Patriots preseason finale in Las Vegas, a game I promise we will not dwell on because, boy, did the offense look like it had slept on some sidewalk off the strip Thursday night and had to be peeled off the pavement Friday morning, handed a coffee, and then went straight to work. Now, I get that we have talked offense on this podcast, but we need to put a bow on the preseason because 53-man roster cuts are coming Tuesday, 4 p.m. That's a deadline for everyone. And if you want a full projection, go back to last week. Fitzy and I did dueling roster projections. You get two for the price of one episode. It was our most listened to episode yet. So people liked either the choices we were making, the jokes Fitzy had, whatever was going on there. Most of that is still intact. I haven't changed my mind a whole lot since last week. And also my colleague at the Boston Herald, Karen Garrigian, is going to have her final 53-man roster projection out Monday morning. So the only things that have really changed there, we'll get to at the end of the episode. And I promise this one, again, as bad as Friday was, is not going to be an all doom and gloom episode. But if you want sunshine and roses, look, there are plenty of other places for that, because this is just always going to be a sober look at where the Patriots are, which is not as bad as we saw Friday night. The most important competition we saw this week was Tuesday and Wednesday in joint practices. When the Patriots and Raiders starters went head-to-head, Vegas rested all of their starters Friday night. And Mac Jones, as we detailed in our last episode with Jim McBride, was 20 of 25 in team drills on Wednesday in that final joint practice. But despite that, the Patriots are not where they want to be. And all you had to do was listen to Mac and Bill Belichick post-game. So here's what we've learned from the preseason in its entirety. Again, it's not as bad as Friday night, but Friday was really concerning because I'm at the point with takeaway number one here that Mac Jones' year two leap, which you heard me say early in training camp, we were talking like it's already happened. It's on hold. It's not canceled, okay? And it's on hold really due to factors outside of his control. But let's recap his preseason, okay? He's played in 2 games against Carolina and Las Vegas. Both of those defenses rested their starters. He went 13 of 21 for 132 yards, 3 sacks. He got hit 5 times. That's a completion percentage of 62%, and he averaged 6.3 yards per attempt. Now, before anyone shoves small sample size down my throat, I get it. But again, those are all against second and third stringers. Secondly, small samples are all that we have. Like, welcome to the preseason. This is it. The sample is only shrinking as the NFL goes from 4 to 3 preseason games, and spoiler alert, is about to go to 2. And last year, as we wrap this up, Mac, when he emerged as a better passer than Cam Newton, no one, not even the Patriots, was clamoring, oh, small sample. Okay, you just saw it, you got it, and you understood. And speaking of last year, again, Mac, this preseason, 13 to 21, 132 yards, 3 sacks, an interception, 62% completion percentage. Last year, also against backups, he was 36 of 52 for 388 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, 5 sacks, and a completion percentage of 69% with a 7 yards per attempt average. So bottom line there, all of those numbers are better from last year. They've gone down this year. I'm not in the camp that Mac Jones has already regressed. You could say by the look of it, it seems like he has, but that is something that I will need a bigger sample of, again, starting defense to declare, because we know he's in better shape. He's still, for the most part, razor accurate, but he's been a little skittish. He was spooked against Carolina, unusually inaccurate, even within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage on those first 2 drives. Then they get going once he's protected. He was spooked to start the Raiders game. And then you look at his last snap. It's the same deal. The first sign of pressure, he's bailing. And then you have a throwaway on 3rd down in the red zone. So part of this is due to protection, no doubt about it. But when Mac was under pressure last year, everyone's going, oh, this is a kid beyond his years. And now in Vegas, under pressure, he was 1 for 4 with an interception that I still cannot explain the more I watch it. So Mac Jones' year 2 leap cannot save this offense on its own. For now, it's on hold. They've got a lot more issues to figure out. And number 2 takeaway from the preseason, the offensive line is really struggling badly. And pass protection, we just talked about this, but if you just boil down all the numbers, the sacks, the hits, the hurries, Mac got hit on more than 1 out of every 5 of his dropbacks this preseason. And new right tackle Isaiah Wynn gave up a sack and a quarterback hit over 4 drives, just 4 drives, not a half, not a whole game, 4 drives on Friday against the Raiders backups. Swing tackle, Justin Herron, guy who's played left, he's played right, he's done okay. He gave up a strip sack against Brian Hoyer, and he's had a tough summer, granted, with some injuries that, of course, I'm sure I would never want to deal with and certainly would keep me out longer than a week or whatever it was a couple of weeks ago. Cole Strange, he's allowed to pressure in each of the last 2 preseason games. Another guy playing just about 4 to 5 drives. So you get the problems here. Pass protection, luckily for the Patriots, can kind of be papered over, though, if Mac has a quick trigger, or the offensive line, which has already made some adjustments in protection, just keeps working at that and has a dialogue between David Andrews and Mac Jones, who had mastered the old system under Josh McDaniels. So there's work to be done there. The issue, as much as you've heard me say tons of times, where the passing game should be weighted much more heavily in the run game, though, the issue is in the running game, because from things that have been reported, Doug Kyed of Pro Football Focus had a couple of weeks ago, the Patriots felt they would get settled once they, quote, established a run. I said, this is very old school thinking. This is not the cutting edge of modern football that you want and need. I talked to Deron Harmon this week, ex-Patriot safety now with the Raiders. I said, what are you seeing in this offense? What are you hearing from your old coaches and teammates? He's saying they want to run the ball. They're physical. It's going to be bigger personnel, a lot more 2 tight ends. And his belief was they would get there. Well, Tuesday joint practices, they got stuffed 7 out of 8 times. 6 out of 7, depending on who you talk to, but ultimately not great. And not just the total number of run stops, which this is going to take a while because they haven't been in pads for all of summer. They're working towards this in the run game and the run defense. But when you look at specifically at the plays, an outside zone, which when we're talking all this Shanahan style stuff, that's what we mean, the outside zone game paired with the bootlegs and the play action off of it. They have averaged more than 2 yards on man-blocked runs. They're old stuff, so power and counter where you see a pulling guard coming around the edge, or crack tosses like Ramondre Stevenson gained 13 yards there in the second quarter in Vegas, or duo, which is kind of, it's harder to discern because it looks so close to inside zone, but basically it's an inside run where you start automatically with double teams. They're doing better with all of these runs than the outside zone, which on Friday alone, we're going from small samples now to just tiny. They ran 4 outside zone plays. One went backwards for -4 yards. Another went for 2 yards. Another went for 3 yards. And the other one had a holding penalty, which even if they hadn't called it, would have gone for 0 yards. So that's 1 yard total on 4 rushes and a holding penalty. And that's not great. That hold also on Isaiah Wynn, not great to be Isaiah Wynn these days, even though it was whistled for Mike Onwenu. And in recent years, when you look at, running game and analytics, the reason why I bring up all this, again, this is not going to be all doom and gloom, but the offensive line is important because as good as Damian Harris is and as good as Ramondre Stevenson is, and they're really, really good, when you look at the analytics, a team's running game and how effective or not effective it is really dependent on 2 things: how good your offensive line is, and then how many defenders are in the box pre-snap. That's largely it. And if you think about it, that makes sense because as much as, the power of one person holding the ball he's one out of, you're talking 16 to 17 guys in there, including the blockers, the quarterback handing the ball off, and everyone on defense, okay? 1 out of 16 is not going to determine that play more than the 15 other players crashing in to stop them. So it doesn't matter if you have the Dallas Cowboys offensive line from the 90s, okay? If you stack the box, you're not going to run the ball well. But right now, teams don't have to stack the box to stop the Patriots, who are trying this new running game, and it's not going anywhere. And that's the problem, big picture. The Patriots are not good. In fact, they've been poor at all the new things that they set out to change and try under Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. The offensive line with the outside zone is going nowhere. Their 2 tight end personnel average 2.9 yards per play in Vegas. Their protection schemes have holes in them. And the coaches in charge are not experienced in how to problem solve and fix this. And there's a way. They will find a way to get better. This is how the Patriots work. It's just taking longer than expected. And when you look at the issues, if you have problems up front, that's going to affect everything else and much faster than you would if, okay, we can't get guys free on the outside. Okay, run some pick routes. Have some switch releases. There are schemes to get guys open, screens, different things of that nature. Like the Patriots did as a top 10 scoring offense last year, despite being the most pressed team in the NFL. So much of this is going to fall on Patricia and Judge, and ultimately Bill Belichick, who's really been running with the offense and coaching it in practices 90% of the time. Like, this is his offense, and you just need to see where this goes, because when you have Mac Jones' year 2 leap on hold and a running game that's really in trouble because the offensive line is struggling with these new schemes, you're not going to be able to get anything off the ground. Now, third takeaway, something that could get off the ground, and this is where we're taking a break from all the black clouds, as bad as that info was. The defense, I'll tell you, and I fully believe this, has top 10 upside this year. And I think this is a high variance unit, meaning you could have, in all the universes out there, a great defense, maybe even top 5. And in other universes, certainly a bottom 10 unit. And a lot of this is going to come down to health. If Matt Judon, Jalen Mills are out, we're looking at a lot of trouble. Devin McCourty, all those guys. But a lot of it is going to hinge on takeaways. And takeaways will disguise bad defenses as good ones, good defenses are great defenses, and take great defenses with good talent and discipline and pressure and coverage and make them all-time units. So it's TBD on that. But up front, I'll tell you, I'm cautiously okay with this pass rush. I mean, Matt Judon's still in his prime. Anthony Jennings had 9 pressures this preseason. Again, context, against backups from the Giants, Panthers, and Raiders. But there's a reason that guy is starting opposite Judon, not only in the preseason, but in joint practices, in practices before that, and coming out of nowhere as a third-year guy. Then you got Christian Barmore. He's been quiet the last week or two, but he's in there. If you just keep Josh Uche on third downs, not early downs where he's going to duck inside and allow a touchdown, as we saw in the first quarter against the Raiders, he'll be fine. There's enough talent there. The other part about that, as we move back with this defense, the second level play, I think, is going to be much steadier because the beginning and end of last year, Dante Hightower comes back, he's getting his feet wet, and then it looks like he's drowning. Like, you're going to have steadier play with Juwan Bentley officially in his prime. Raekwon McMillan, who sneaky had an outstanding preseason, and then a guy like Mack Wilson, who will jump in dime packages and be the lone linebacker with as much speed as any inside linebacker I think the Patriots might have had, certainly since Jamie Collins early in his career. And he's making plays. So you've got the 3 of them. Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips will be then in that second level, where Duggar, of course, going into his 3rd season, Phillips in his 3rd season with the Patriots. Like, that's going to be a steadier level. You're not going to have Hightower missing tackles against the Colts or Kyle Van Noy having to bounce in and out where the foot speed just isn't there. That's going to be better. The bigger question, as we go back and out of the outside, is, of course, going to be corner. And this isn't something new if you've been following along, but the difference in this conversation is Jonathan Jones, who I've said on this podcast multiple times, teams are picking on him. They did enjoy practices. They've done in the preseason game, throwing jump balls up against him because he's 5'9". Now, if he can take care of that, their problems aren't over, because as good as Miles Bryant and Marcus Jones have been in the slot, and it was really their improvement in production that allowed the Patriots to bump Jonathan Jones outside. If you're Miami in week 1 and you watched Isaiah McKenzie smoke Miles Bryant in week 16 last year, and then again in the playoff game, like, how do you feel when you get to drop Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle in the slot? Like, I think Miles Bryant's had a good camp. I think he's a legitimate NFL player, especially because he can bounce back to safety. But it's going to take 2 of them to solidify that secondary. Now, I think they've got better depth there, and I think if they pivot to some more zone, they'll be okay. But if Jonathan Jones isn't going to work out outside, or you can't count on Bryant or Marcus Jones to work out in the slot, you got to bring Jonathan Jones back in, and then it's Terrence Mitchell, who's a guy who's squarely right now in the roster bubble. And I think the Patriots would trust him more than a guy like Shaun Wade, but does Wade offer more upside long-term? Probably. Like, these are the conversations the team is going to be having over the next couple of days where, again, things could go really right for this defense, as we just talked about, in terms of health and pass rush, and then the cornerback play, or it could swing in the other direction. But before camp, if I told you the Patriots might have a top 10 defense, you should have just shut this podcast off, because I would be saying things that, like, there's really no evidence for this. But when you see the pieces coming together and the better depth up front, and the way you have a new starting corner outside Jonathan Jones, at least theoretically, like, those things have come together, because Jalen Mills has absolutely solidified one end of this defense, getting the better of Devontae Adams in some drills in Vegas. And I'm not saying he's going to be a Pro Bowler or shutdown guy or someone who travels with the number 1 receiver every single game, but you don't have to worry about Jalen Mills. And that's huge, because then you can divert resources either outside or in the slot, depending on if Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, or Miles Bryant need help. But of course, ideally for the Patriots, it would be none of them. All right, let's talk about the defense on Friday. Because, look, you give up 2 scores right away to Jarrett Stidham, not great. But I'll tell you, I'm not too concerned about that showing, even though it was against the Raiders backups, because the first drive, the Raiders go down to get a field goal. Kyle Duggar's playing single high as a safety, okay? And Devin McCourty's in the box. I would be shocked if we see more than a dozen snaps of that, knowing that Devin McCourty is best positioned, is a guy who's been back there. Like, Devin McCourty's career is not that far away from getting a learner's permit. Like, and he spent virtually his whole career back there as a single high safety. He's still got the 4.4 speed to go sideline to sideline. Kyle Duggar's a good player, but Kyle Duggar is not used to all the play fakes that Devin McCourty has seen. And so Kyle Duggar bit from a single high safety, a place where the rule back there is GTFB in Belichick terminology, get the fuck back. He bit play action tight end right down the seam. drops them inside the red zone. That's just not going to happen. The second one, I've already alluded to this. Raiders again to get down inside the red zone. Josh Uche's starting at the left of the offensive side. It's really the right end on the defense. And he just immediately ducks inside. Someone who's got to set the edge. They're running a toss in his direction. He might as well have just rolled out the red carpet into the end zone. Those are things I don't think we're going to see a whole lot in the regular season. They might if Judon or Anthony Jennings gets hurt or Devin McCourty gets hurt. But all told, the 10 points they gave up to Jarrett Stidham, even though it's Jarrett Stidham, didn't feel as bad to me in terms of what I would expect from this unit because of the depth. All right, I teased some 53-man roster talk. Couple that I think are going to make the team. One, I would have 99.9% confidence in Brendan Schooler, safety out of Texas. This is a guy we had on roster projections dating back to the first week of camp. He's making the team. He started on 3 units Friday night. DeMarcus Mitchell, though, rookie linebacker out of Purdue, who you saw had a nice rush on the first drive Vegas had Friday night in the second half, and it leads to a Jack Jones. I don't remember if it was the forced fumble or the pass breakup, but right along the near sideline. That dude also started on 3 teams. And this was a night when Matthew Slater, Cody Davis, and Justin Bethel started on all 4. So their presence there on 3 of the 4 starting units for special teams is big. LeBron Ray, Alabama, outside linebacker, such defensive end. I'm still not sure about. He's in the 54th, 55th guy conversation for me. I think he's going to make the team because when you look at him, like he's setting a solid edge. He plays with heavy hands. He's very good in these 2-man games with the stunt, which freed up Daniel Akwale for a sack. I think they see him as someone who obviously had some untapped potential with all the injuries he dealt with at Alabama, but also you're probably not sneaking through waivers at this point, and you just say, we'll keep him for now. Once everyone sets their 53-man rosters, maybe we'll release him later on if we can't make the numbers work or when Tyquan Thornton comes back. But I think Ray's done enough there. The one guy I don't know about and is often thrown around in these undrafted conversations is Cody Russi. So he's a center out of Houston. He's certainly gotten better throughout this preseason and training camp. And with how injury prone the Patriots offensive line is, though, they need guys with positional versatility. And I just haven't seen that from him yet. Like, I don't think he's played any guard. And they need guys who can not only just do center guard, but sometimes kick out to tackle. Like Will Sherman is a second-year guy. He's played pretty well at guard, and he's moonlighted at tackle, and that's what they have here. So I would, if Russi makes the roster, I would count on James Ferentz getting cut, going to the practice squad because James Ferentz is not going anywhere. And then they might promote Ferentz over Russi, make Russi inactive, but he's a guy I just don't know yet as exclusively a center with David Andrews healthy and playing well that you would put on the 53-man roster over some of these other guys that we just talked about. So before we get to Tuesday, as we wrap it up here, Patriots are going to return to work on Monday, is my understanding. Cuts coming at 4 p.m. Tuesday. I would expect Belichick to speak Wednesday morning, perhaps even Tuesday morning, which is what happened last year. And then I think the team's going to get around 2 days off around Labor Day weekend. So, look, there's a long way to go. And you're going to hear Belichick say that time and again, and there's truth in it. But the good news for them is, despite all those stats that I rattled off and where we are with this offense, they've got 2 weeks to kind of figure it out. And it feels in a way kicking the can down the road because, you can roll back the tape. Going into the Carolina joint practices felt like an inflection point for this offense. Are they going to stick with it? Are they going to change things? What's going to happen? Same thing was said about Vegas. You can't go into your last preseason game and have an offense that's falling apart. And to their credit, they rebounded. Really good practice for the starting offense on Wednesday. And then you had this roller coaster downturn on Friday. And that matters. That counts. I think if Mac Jones doesn't throw an interception or doesn't end his first series with a sack or go 3 and out in the second drive, whatever the order was in those, like they probably wouldn't be out there as long. Like there's a reason teams are starting to rest all their guys in that last week. But they have to sort this out in practice. They have to do it against themselves because this is not a good matchup in Miami, but we got plenty of time before we get to that. So it's never as bad as it looks. The old saying is true. It's never as great as it feels. The Patriots will be in a wildly different place in a couple weeks from now, certainly come mid-October when I mentioned Tyquan Thornton, as we just heard from Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, is likely to come back. So till then, hang in. We will have a podcast to recap whatever happens on Tuesday with the 53-man roster. And then later, as I said last week, a pod with Seth Wickersham. He's going to come on. We're going to do some really, really big picture stuff because, with the Patriots taking some days off around Labor Day, there's a lot of time to fill without a lot of practice, preseason games, or joint practices. But we made it. Summer is over. We're going to have the week 1 roster here soon. And until then, we'll catch you next week.